Well, good evening. Welcome to the ProLib show. I'm ProLib. Hi. With me, as always, is Kitty. Hi, Kitty. Who went to a big meeting of godless heathen infidels called Free Flow.
I mean, I'm card carrying up over here, so
She's card carrying, atheistic, hedonistic, degenerate.
Well, heathen. I guess you could say hedonistic too. I mean, we have our moments.
Anyway, I'm glad you're here.
Is that heathenistic? Are you just combining the words?
Heathen.
¿Por qué no los dos? ¿Por qué no los dos?
I don't speak French. Anyway, and then Mr.
You know I don't speak Portuguese.
You know I don't speak Latin.
I'm proud of you for eating the whole wheel of cheese.
Mr. Christopher Mowdy is here. Old friend of the show. Mr. Mowdy was on this channel when I had like 10 subscribers. That's not even a lie.
The Wayback Machine.
I was a little tiny baby. I mean, I'm still a little tiny baby, but it's
like a sweet little baby.
Just a birthday boy. Just a precious little birthday boy.
Precious little birthday boy. I put it out on Blue Sky and everything. This is the 6-year anniversary of the channel this week.
Woo!
Oh, that's awesome.
Years I've been doing this.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Tonight we are trying out. So let me tell you what happened. StreamYard, very different thing. StreamYard sent me a free trial to try StreamYard. So we're trying it out tonight. Here's the problem. I can't put YouTube comments up on the screen. Can't even see them. So I will not be sticking with StreamYard because that does not work for us. Twitch, I think, works. So if you're watching on Twitch, send us a comment. I'm curious if we can see it and put it up on screen. Unfortunately, YouTube we can't put up on the screen like we normally.
Why is that? I have StreamYard and I can see YouTube comments and I can highlight them. Now,
sure.
I can't scroll them if that's what you're talking about.
No. So because this was a pre-scheduled stream, I didn't just go live. Mm-hmm. It can't find the comments from pre-scheduled streams, which I didn't know until like 5 minutes before. I would have changed everything, but I didn't know until maybe more like 10 minutes. It's like, oh, so we don't have comments tonight. Which sucks because that's one of my favorite things. Now I can still see the comments because I have YouTube open, so I can see the comments. Like I can still see what you're saying.
Not the same.
I just can't put them up on the screen. It's not the same, but I can't put them up on the screen, unfortunately. So I still can't see when you talk.
Engagement.
Yes, but hello Spackle and Spatchcock and Titan. Jeff's here. So I do see you guys. I can't put you up on the screen, unfortunately, because StreamYard doesn't like it. If you do have a comment and you do want it to be up on the screen, you have to go watch me on Twitch, twitch.tv/DarmerValina. It's the same show. It's just on Twitch instead of YouTube. You see, it's the exact same thing. It's just, it's what I'm going to do, Titan. I'm going to read them out. Just want to let people know that if I'm not putting your comments up on the screen, it's not that I don't like them or don't see them. It's just that we can't with this setup, which I didn't know, or we wouldn't have used StreamYard. Anyway, now that that's out of the way, Mr. Mowdy, you made a video. That video is in the description below, by the way. If you haven't seen that video, make sure you watch it. It's about 11 minutes long or so.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it around a nice tight 10 to 12.
It's a nice tight 10 to 12. Phrasing. But the topic of the video is one that I personally find it resonates with me because of kind of my personal interests.
Mm-hmm. You're a eugenicist?
No. So, but I'm very into the origin of words.
Yeah.
And there is a book, a critical race theory book, is written by Dr. Randall Kennedy. Dr. Randall Kennedy is one of the reasons that critical race theory exists is a lot of the research that Dr. Kennedy did. The title of the book is the slur for people of African-American origin. Mm-hmm. And it's an examination of how did this one word become so devastating and terrible. The only reason I didn't link it in the description is that when I link it in the description, it shows the title. And I don't want YouTube to think that like I'm saying that word. That's just what Dr. Randall Kennedy titled his book. And there's nothing, it's not an evil book. It's a book about the origin of the word. It's like the court cases there. For instance, there's just one court case that happened. I believe it was in the 1950s, if I'm remembering right. It was an African-American taxi driver in New York. And he had a conversation with his manager. And as he left the room, he heard his manager use that word to refer to him to one of his coworkers, right?
Mhm.
I'm glad that blank has left the room, I think is what he said, something along those lines. He sued for discrimination. And the judge found that since he wasn't using the word directly at him, he was using it in reference to him. He was simply out of earshot that no discrimination happened. And there's lots of these types of, things that happen throughout the book. But it's an examination of how that word became civilified.
Oh yeah.
It's a good read. I suggest everyone who hasn't read it should go look it up. You can find it. You can find it on, bookshop.org and whatnot. And so I asked for that book when it came out in 2002.
Mhm.
Well, I think I asked for it in 2003, but it was on one of the syllabuses for one of my college courses, one of my constitutional law courses. And I asked for it for Christmas, and my dad was like, sure, I don't care. I'll buy it for you.
Mhm.
And I ended up reading it, obviously. So the whole theory of critical race theory is just something that I find fascinating. Like, how did we take this whole portion of the populace and just completely dehumanize them throughout the 20th century? Even after civil rights was happening, there were still these efforts to dehumanize Black people.
Oh yeah.
And I promise Chris I'm going to give Chris all the time. I'm just.
Oh no, set it up, baby. You were setting me up for the biggest alley-oop of all time.
Absolutely.
Cream
So
in
the
the
last thing
jeans.
I'll talk
Yeah.
about is the founding father that I bring up far too much, Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, in regards to African folk, is probably the greatest dichotomy in American history. Because on one hand, he was writing, oh, slavery is like holding a wolf by the ears. You don't like it, but you dare not let it go. And writing to his daughter Patsy about Black people smell worse than other people because scientifically, this was a letter written by Thomas Jefferson. This is what he said, that Black people exuded more toxins, I think is the word he used, through their glands, and white people excreted more through their bladder. So basically he's saying Black people smell bad because their skin excretes urine, which it's just, they're not sharks. Like this is nothing.
That's fucking wild. I never heard that before.
Oh yeah. It's this whole
that
letter he wrote.
believed that.
I think it was to Patsy. I think it was his daughter Patsy that he wrote that one. And of course the whole situation with Sally Hemings, where Sally Hemings was his dead wife's half sister. Her mother was one of his dead wife's father's slaves. When they got married and his father-in-law died, he got all of his father-in-law's slaves. That's why Monticello became a mansion, because Thomas Jefferson inherited a bunch of slaves who built a mansion for him. And then his wife died, and he started SAing Sally Hemings when she was 14 or 15. We don't even really know how old she was because she was a slave. Nobody kept those records, and impregnated her multiple times. We know it's true because we can do the DNA records of the people that say that they are her and his descendants, and it's been proved. Like, it's not a rumor. We know that all of this is true, right? And yet at the same time, Thomas Jefferson is saying slavery is the greatest danger to the longevity of the United States. The same person said both things.
Mm-hmm.
He lamented to his daughter, I hate, in the original draft of the Declaration of Independence, it would have outlawed the international slave trade. the same man drafted a document that would have outlawed forever the international slave trade while he was forcibly impregnating the slave half-sister of his dead wife.
And I'm sure it made sense to him in some way.
I mean,
Mowdy.
cognitive dissonance is a hell of a drug.
Mowdy, when I saw your video, these are all the things that went through my head at the same time because I have issues and I drink too much coffee.
Volumes.
Oh, yeah.
Babe, you've got volumes, not issues.
So could you please give us kind of maybe the overall rundown of the video and your thesis of it, and that's where we'll jump off from.
Sure. So yes, I'm glad that those are the things that come to your mind because they are outrageous and they're kind of meant to bring those kinds of it's meant to outrage. Even though I talk in my calm academic dulcet tones, I very much am giving content that is very outrageous. And so you were talking about slavery. Okay, let's talk about the end of the Civil War, 1860s. And Jim Crow laws. Well, about 100 years after the Civil War, the Brown versus Education case was being fought in the courts. Now, before we get there to Brown, 1956, sorry, the cat's on my lap and hair's everywhere. America went through a very weird synergy of experimental psychology, intelligence testing, psychometrics, biometrics. And by the way, let me tell you what these terms are. Psychometrics is just the measurement of mental ability. Biometrics is the measurement of anatomy, nose size, nose angle, head size, brain cavity volume, things like that. Obviously, because the brain cavity holds the brain, and that's a potential measurement of brain size.
Sure.
And that with just hatred of certain kinds of people, also science fiction ideas of controlling society through scientific engineering. Keep in mind, H.G. Wells is writing science fiction books at the time, a known hardcore eugenicist. So eugenics is kind of where all of these things culminate. What's eugenics? Eugenics is a word invented by a guy named Sir Francis Galton, who was, I think, a second cousin of Darwin. And he came up with it in like the 1870s. Its etymology, the history of the word, is eu, meaning good, and genics, meaning origin. So of good stock, right? So think of pedigree in the 1870s. That's what he's thinking. Well, pedigree, people come from great pedigree, and people are at the top because they belong there, natural aristocracy. So based on people's genealogy, we can determine their purity and their pedigree, whether they come from good stock. If you've ever heard that term, that's where that comes from. So this eugenic idea of Galton makes its way to the United States, and Americans just want to use this social engineering to its benefit. Social hygiene, baby. There are good and there are bad, right? And the bad, they're not like us. We're not like them. We're not the same. And
Right.
we should get rid of them because they have less value. How do we know they have less value? Science tells us. Mistake number one, right? Using science to create value or to determine value. Go ahead.
It's interesting because during the slave trade days, they did the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. They would have these, charts that would measure different things about slaves. So when you were going through the slave yard trying to buy a new slave, you could have this chart that would say, oh yeah, this slave's teeth are a 6 of 10. Mm-hmm. And this slave, their arms are, this wide and they're this tall. Mm-hmm. And the slaves would be encouraged to educate, God, the whole thing makes me sick. Educate the people looking to buy them that they don't need to be beaten very often. That they're very well obedient. If you want me to work, because slaves would work if there was a full moon. You basically worked 36 hours straight in the fields or whatever it is that you were doing. If it was light enough to be outside, you just worked all night.
Mhm.
You didn't get breaks. You didn't get breaks. You didn't get, and the thinking at the time was that Black people were more resilient. And we still have these problems today, by the way, throughout the medical field, where Black people are not given, especially Black women, are not given drugs at the same frequency and dosage as people of other ethnicities, because there's this inherent feeling that Black people are more resilient or they feel less pain. None of it's true, but that's just, unfortunately,
Well, that's their savage nature.
correct. And it's not, of course, but that's
Oh yeah.
the
Oh, please.
Yeah, like
tongue in
there
cheek.
are doctors right now that believe that Black people have higher pain tolerances
Right.
and thicker skin, like literally thicker skin than white people.
Mhm.
And it's just it's Black women that get it the worst because they're dealing with, the women discrimination in the medical, which that ties into something I was talking to Dom about before. Seeing Maudie, I'm thinking back to Ethan.
It's
Like,
fine. It's fine. It's fine.
yeah.
Just keep going.
But we were talking about a book that I actually just picked up, and it is by Kat Bohannon, and it's how the female body drove 200 million years of human evolution. And it's talking about just like differences with women and how women aren't properly studied just in general in science.
Yes.
Like Ambien, they found out women needed a lower dosage of that, and it wasn't till it went to market and women were getting in car accidents the next morning that they found out there are genetic conditions that pregnant women aren't part of the testing pool for drugs and medications, so they're completely removed from that equation. So it's not until it goes to market that you actually start finding issues with these things. So there's already an issue for people assigned female at birth, in medicine and just like in society in general. And when you add like racism or other types of bigotries to that, it just exponentially makes it worse.
Yeah, exactly. So like we'll be talking, or my video is about racial science, right? Like racist science, scientific racism. But I definitely think that there is scientific sexism, and there's a long history of that against women. And I think that there's a new version of it that's kind of being used as a value test. And I think it's against the trans community, right? It's this whole
Sure.
Matt Walsh, what is a woman? Which I just feel like I could blow a hole in just a minute or two,
Of course.
right? So actually just humor me about this, right? So do you know anything about baseball, Dom or Kitty?
A bit, yeah.
Okay. Tell me what a strike is. What is a strike in baseball?
Well, strikes when you try to hit the ball and you miss.
Okay. Is that all that a strike is?
No,
Well,
if it goes over the strike zone and you don't swing on it,
Hold on
then
a second.
isn't
So
that?
off the bat, you're telling me that a strike, just a variable in the all-American red-blooded, red, white, and blue game of baseball, is two things at the same time?
it's
So that's
actually
all that
three
it is?
things.
So hold on a second. What if I hit the ball, but it goes outside of a certain line?
That's what I was going to say. So you could actually foul the ball, but that can also be counted as a strike.
A foul is a strike. So if I get 3 fouls, am I out?
No, you
No.
have to get 4 fouls.
So a
but-
foul's a strike until it's not. A strike
Correct.
is when you swing and hit it or
Right.
not, if it's in a particular place.
Correct. There's also sometimes you can try to bunt the ball.
Yeah.
So, and if you miss the bunt, that's usually a foul, not a strike.
Oh, okay.
I love you, Maudie.
So anytime that you don't swing, is that a strike?
No, that's what I'm saying. Because you could also bunt the ball and not, so you're not actually swinging, but you miss the bunt, and that can be considered a foul.
Man, strikes seem super fucking complicated.
Yeah.
What's a woman again?
Exactly.
Are you telling
I
me
love
that
that.
women are less complex than a strike in the all-American red, white, and blue-blooded game of baseball?
Yeah.
American Pie, motherfuckers.
Hey, in football, can you in 10 words or less explain what offsides is? No? Because is it offensive offsides or is it defensive offsides?
Yeah.
And by the way, sometimes defensive offsides, it looks like defensive offsides. It's actually a neutral zone infraction because you're lined up incorrectly. I mean, that's defensive offsides, but it's actually a neutral zone infraction. But sometimes you look at the neutral zone infraction, you're like, that's not really a neutral zone infraction. That's actually encroachment.
And the same dudes that could explain this and talk about it all day
Mhm.
can't tell the difference between what is and isn't a woman.
No.
Also, they probably have never actually brought a woman to completion in their lives. Like,
By the
let's
way,
be real.
all of them just wrote multi-paragraphs on Twitter about what's going on in the stock market,
Yeah.
explaining tariffs.
And another thing on Matt Walsh, because like seriously, fuck that guy.
Sure.
His
him.
whole film, like Lady Ballers, one, it's awful. Like, don't watch it. Like,
I've
not even
never-
for picking it apart. It's just
Yeah.
terrible. But originally, he had planned on it being a documentary where he was just going to get a bunch of dudes together and say, "Yeah, we identify as women, so we want to play on women's sports teams." And they're like, "Yeah, no, that's not how that works. Like, you have to be on hormones and you have to actually be like." Seeking medical treatment for an extended period, like depending on like the sports league, different things. So that's why they made it a comedy movie, you know, a la like Cock Blockers kind of thing, as opposed to a documentary, which was what the original thing was, because their entire premise they realized was faulty. So
Right.
they made a propaganda comedy film to push their narrative when their documentary fell flat.
Right. And the NCAA has had these rules in place about transitioning, and you must be on heroin and stuff. Heroin. Oh my God.
Jesus
Hello.
Christ.
That's
You must be on
fantastic.
hormones.
Yes.
You must be
Yes.
on heroin. I'm
We are
sorry.
living in my fucking dystopia, baby.
I mean,
If you want to play college sports, you got to be on heroin.
here's the thing.
great.
I am like uber libertarian when it comes to that. I may legalize, tax, and regulate drugs, get rid of the black market, you know,
Right.
because prohibition does not work. But that's
Oh, 100%.
that's my
I
take.
totally agree.
I wouldn't necessarily recommend it.
I wouldn't
especially if
recommend
you're
it,
gonna be
but
playing
yeah.
sports,
But
you know, but
my point is, the NCAA has had these rules in place for over a decade. This isn't, it's not like it's something new where, yeah, you've got to have been on HRT under medical supervision. You can't just start taking HRT on your own. Like, you know,
can't swipe your sister's birth control pills.
right. That's not how that works.
And I might have seen it on a meme on your Discord or somewhere else, but like there are fewer trans athletes, according to the NCAA, than Trump has like rape charges.
I believe so.
Well,
I mean, just to show you like what we're talking about. This is a
right. Well, the
teapot. This is
one
not
of the big
this was
issues
this
is
was an othering that was blown so out of proportion that it forced
Right.
Democrats to respond to it in a way that they couldn't look good answering it.
well, not only that, the reason that we don't really know how many people have played college sports as, you know, trans people that play college sports, because no one cared enough to track. Like, okay, you're following all the rules, you know, you consider yourself a woman and or a man, however, you know, whatever it is, and you've been under, okay, well, that's what you're classified as now. Nobody was like, oh, well, we've got to put a big yellow T next to your name on the scoreboard.
And let's not forget the non-binary people that may not be undergoing
Right.
hormone therapies, you
Sure.
know, but they are still under the trans umbrella.
Right.
So, you know, it wasn't an issue until they needed a boogeyman. And it's very
Right,
similar to how the Southern Baptist Convention, they used to consider abortion to be something between, you know, a doctor and the woman having the procedure.
Right.
But around the time of the Civil Rights Act passage, they were against that. They
Sure.
did not want Black people having equal rights. And when they realized that was a losing battle because the tide had turned, they needed something else to galvanize their base, their voting bloc. So they changed tact. And that's when, you know, they stopped saying that it's between a woman and her doctor. And like, it is not conception when life begins, but at first breath when the child is born, as it
Right.
says in the Bible. It became a life begins at conception. All life is precious. Like, we are pro-life, even though they're only pro-birth because they don't give a shit if the child dies in a gutter after it is born. But
And
that's a
Protestants-
whole other thing.
And Protestants have believed that life begins at first breath, which is how God created Adam and Eve. He breathed in life into them. That's where that comes from. It's from the Bible. They believe that for centuries. For centuries, that was the thinking.
But they couldn't hate on Black people anymore because
Right.
it wasn't popular. So they needed something else. And now, you know, they're the dog that caught the car with abortion. Like, you know, the Dobbs decision, like, but eventually I'm pretty sure that it's going, you know, we're gonna get, you know, essentially Roe back eventually, hopefully, if the empire doesn't fall first. But that being said, you know, they are the dog that caught the car with abortion, and they realized that that wasn't popular because even in like Kentucky, they're passing protections for abortion rights. So now they're like, well, we need something else. So first it was anti-Black people, then it was anti-abortion, and now it's anti-trans people. So like you can see the pattern there. It's
Sure.
whenever the tide turns publicly, they need to pick a different, you know, wagon hitch the horse to, so that they can galvanize people through propaganda and hate.
And that ties into Maudi's video, because if you can convince people to dehumanize some section of the population, whatever it is, whether it's Black people, whether it's women, whether it's trans people, whatever it is, they're going to be more willing to dehumanize some other group.
Mhm.
And you can turn someone hating Black people, whatever it is, into them. Oh, well, we have to, next thing you know, it's, oh yeah, well, we've got to ship random Venezuelans to El Salvador, whether or not they
Hello.
are actually criminals.
So
Not only that, but not only that, but like the anti-trans thing, if you follow it down like the rabbit hole, it eventually ends up JQing, where it's
Right.
like, oh, why are there so many trans people? It's the Jews. So it literally always leads back to hate of another group. And it's because divide and conquer is like the oldest strategy in the book. If you don't have the people galvanized together, if you have them fight against each other, then it is much easier to assert power over them. The whole first they came for the communists, and I said nothing because I wasn't a communist.
And by the way, Titan did confirm there are fewer professional trans athletes than there are accusations against Trump for SA. He did.
Thank you,
give us
Titan.
that confirmation. So again, I put it up on the screen, but it's not working. This is the only time it's not going to work, by the way. Next, we'll have it back next week.
So speaking about, you know, or riding on the coattails of what you were just saying, I wrote a list in preparation for this. I made some notes and stuff, but I happened to write a list that I consider
it's more work than I did.
And and well, you watched the video. That's
true. I did. I watched it a couple of times actually.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you. I appreciate the views. Since I have been online, right, I call the internet the splinter net, and I very much see like the othering started as soon as I got to the internet.
Sure.
And of course, as far as like the social thing, you know, like for me, it was about atheism, right? So new atheism, the Christians were the other, and then there was the Muslims, and then it's the religious zealots in general. And then feminism got folded into it with like the atheism plus effort, and then LGBTQ rights, and then like MGTOW kind of started forming, going into the manosphere, men of value, the loneliness epidemic, Karens and Giga Chads, and then it came like very political. And this is not a official history. This is just like my recollection, drawing a through line. It became political with Muslims as immigrants and terrorists. Populism was becoming more popular with Brexit. Sorry for the redundancy, populism, popular. An anti-elite sentiment was starting, and an idea of what real Americans were, right? And then over bigotry, like we're almost into today, right? Where there's like legit anti-Semites. You have the Nick Fuenteses of the world, the incels as a result of the loneliness pandemic. White Republican terrorists, you know, quoting race science that they get from Reddit pages or 4chan pages. Explicit talk of the Great Replacement theory, explicit talk about a Black Enlightenment, right? So it's just this othering that I've seen as like, it kind of starts as cliquish, oh, atheism, blah, blah, blah. Then it's atheists against each other. Then it becomes political. And now we're at like Haitians eating our cats and dogs, and, you know, hairdressers getting, what's the word I'm looking for?
Black-bagged.
Thank you. Disappeared into El Salvadorian prisons, which is crazy.
Well, and then the Supreme Court's decision just came out, and I saw it a little bit. I haven't gotten to.
Can you TLDR it?
That's what I'm gonna do. I haven't dove deep. So chat, you can correct me if I get any of this wrong. But basically, what they said was that the United States must facilitate the return. Okay, the word is facilitate. Well, now, guess what the DOJ is going to say is, well, what does facilitate mean? What do you facilitate? Does that mean now facilitate? What facilitate means is you must do, you must enact, you must conduct the return of the man, right? Facilitate isn't a word that's mysterious, but the DOJ is about to pretend that it is, so that they can just leave this man in this prison, hopefully, for them to get lost or never found again. I applaud the Supreme Court when the Supreme Court does things that I like, just like I will be the first to dog on them when they don't. And I appreciate this. It seemed to be, from what I saw, and I only saw it for a couple of minutes because I was getting set up for the show, it was a 9-0. It was a unanimous decision that the United States government needs to facilitate the return of this man. Let's be very, very clear. This man is completely innocent. There's no documented evidence that he has ever committed any kind of crime. And he was simply picked up and sent because he was Venezuelan. It's literally the only reason that he was sent. And ICE, when they asked him, like, what did you use to, determine that he was one of these gang members? Basically, their answer was eugenics. Well, he looked like one. Basically was the answer.
Oh, I can tell a terrorist by looking at them.
Yes.
Mengele said he could tell a Jew by looking at them.
Yes,
In the Jim Crow past, people said that they could look at people and determine how many drops of black blood are in them just by looking at them.
Yep.
I can tell who's feeble-minded. That was the term.
There's a movie. I forget now what the movie is. It's going to come to me in a second. But there's this whole scene between this guy is between two men, and the one man is Irish, I believe, but he has brown eyes. And the other guy's questioning him, saying, well, you have brown eyes, but you're Irish. And he's like, yeah, I'm Irish, but I have brown eyes. And he's like, well, that's because you have, black person in it. He doesn't use the word black person. Mm-hmm. But it's this whole scene. I mean, obviously it's to set this guy up as he's evil and he's the villain and he's a horrible person. But that's the character's through line through the entire movie, is that he can determine who is good and who is bad by how they look.
Oh, yeah. And whether they have any of the poison, contaminated blood in them, right? Racial hygiene, right? Just think of that term, racial hygiene. Well, we need to keep it pure, and we can't allow any contaminants in it.
Right.
It's non-color safe bleaching of the race.
Yep.
But,
and
go ahead.
Oh, no. You continue. I'm sorry.
I was going to pick up on a point that Kitty had made earlier. They were talking about they couldn't hate black people anymore, so they swung to trans, right? With what was the one in Jewish people in the middle? Abortion.
Well, no, it was the black people, then abortion, and now it's trans people.
Right.
Yes. And then you had mentioned when things get to extreme, they're blaming Jewish people.
Yeah, it all goes back to JQing. Yes.
Yeah. The anti-Semite tropes, right? That started in the way back. Just so people who are watching or who will eventually watch this know, when you hear current talking heads saying things like Jewish elites and globalists purposely want to have an influx of people of color so that they can disrupt society so that they can overtake it and gain more power, or anything that rhymes like that, great replacement theory. These ideas are older than dirt. Right. And they were in the popular lexicon back in the 1950s with people writing books about why segregation should be forever. Right. Why we shouldn't integrate, why there shouldn't be desegregation. It was called the equalitarian dogma. Don't you understand that the Jews are in cahoots with the mulattoes? Right. The mulattoes who, have the ambition of a white person, but unfortunately have black in them as well. Unfortunately. But the more of them that exist, the more power the Jews have, you see.
Yep.
These tropes have lasted forever. But in the 50s, when there were Jim Crow laws before Brown, there was a funding agency for all of the outrage, because in Brown versus Education, 1956, they allowed social science into the courts to demonstrate that A, preventing people from having equal rights in America causes psychological harm. Look, I gave a little thumbs up in the program I'm watching myself on. And second, that there are no differences between races in
Right.
education or ability to learn or intelligence. So unfortunately, the NAACP, who were fighting that case in court, they allowed the social science in with like a chicken soup philosophy, like, it can't hurt, right? And unfortunately, that ended up being an avenue through which scientific racism
Yep.
could provide their evidence into court systems. And even when they couldn't prevent Brown, and even when they couldn't postpone Brown, they had to lament that Brown was implemented by keeping up this steady pace of hate literature, science, scientific racism, to show that they're not like us, we're not like them, and we're not the same. And the money for that came from a guy named Wyclef Draper and a fund of his called the Pioneer Fund. Now, to again draw on Kitty's analogy of, we'll leave out the abortion bit because the bookended bits serve my purpose. When the right is against blacks, well, the Pioneer Fund was there to give them all the money that they needed to have the science to present in court for the Stella case, for instance, which was like the anti-Brown case, as well as there was another one that begins with an E that I can't remember right now. I can't shake it loose. Regardless, and since then has funded scientific racism. And the same fund got rebranded as the Human Diversity Fund, and now along
my
with
dog's chewing on something. I'm sorry. I'll be right back.
No worries. And along with that pendulum swing, the HDF and people who fund the HDF are funding anti-DEI, anti-woke, anti-trans influencers like Peter Boghossian, right? Like what's his name? This guy, I can never pronounce the dude's name. Harenia? How do you pronounce dude's name? Hanania.
I think it's Hanania. He was chewing on a towel for some reason. I don't know.
That's good.
I think it's Hanania. Yeah, I think you're
right. So Hanania received about $200,000 from the Conroe Foundation, which is head by Andrew Conroe. The Conroe Foundation gave money to when the Pioneer Fund was dying, right? The Pioneer Fund is what funded scientific racism and anti-integration in the South during the 50s. They are alive and well because this guy Conroe gave them more money to stay alive, and it got rebranded and is alive as the HDF. The guy that kept the Pioneer Fund alive is giving money currently. In the year 2022 and 23, Boghossian received $600,000 from the Conroe Foundation. Right? Just to show you the bizarre parallels of how history rhymes. In 1956, there was a book funded by the Pioneer Fund called The Equalitarian Dogma by Henry Garrett, which pretty much tried to show that equalitarianism is a sophisticated, sentimental thing that we need to get rid of because the Jews and the mulattoes are working together to make things equal in a way that they shouldn't be.
Right.
3 years ago, Conroe gave money to some super racist YouTuber to write his own book. Guess what he called it? The Equalitarian Dogma.
He just named it the same thing again?
Yes, just with a different subtitle.
I mean, to be fair, they don't
Pioneer Fund,
come up with new
Pioneer Fund, Equalitarian Dogma, Equalitarian Dogma. Like, what's going on? Who are these people? I'm Seinfeld now.
They don't come up with new talking points. I mean, if you look at they're coming for the children, or they're trying, to trans the children, how is that really any different than the blood libel from,
It's the exact same thing.
anti-Semites? Like
it was the justification.
The children, because once they get to them, well,
that was the justification that Hitler and Goebbels and Himmler, I guess too, used for the Hitler Youth. Was we have to train our youth to be like us, because if we don't, the Jews will. Yeah. That was the entire justification for setting up the Hitler Youth. And you're seeing it today with, we have to get rid of the Department of Education because our schools are teaching all of our kids to be liberals. It's the exact same argument.
When really they're not being taught to be liberals. They're taught critical thinking skills, and they're actually meeting people that are outside of their own like little bubble. And
Right.
by interacting with people that are different from you, and by learning like history, like you form a more like just liberal and
Yeah. You
just
just recognize
humanist type
people are
mentality.
basically all the same.
Well, it's the anti-elite sentiment. It's like the popularism against anti-elite. So if we could continue the story and bring us to the anti-elite. Like, you guys are just feeding me wonderful softballs. This is great.
Sure.
Because ultimately what happens is the scientific racism gets focused in the 1970s on a guy named Arthur Jensen. And Arthur Jensen's a legit education psychologist who happens to do research that points out, according to him, that there are genetic race differences in educability between blacks and whites, and therefore they should be given two different forms of education, right? So he glosses it over with that last part, but like when you focus on the middle part, you're like, how the fuck do you know it's inherited? How do you know it's genetic? And like, why are you so adamant about it?
Right.
He ends up getting money from the Pioneer Fund. Jump ahead another 22 years, and I am a sophomore in college, 1994, in the fall. And I'm taking a course called Intelligence. And Intelligence is taught by William H. Tucker. And this is one of the books you used on your thumbnail.
It is.
Right? He was my professor. And that year, the bell curve came out that October, 1994. And I was taking Tucker's class on intelligence. So when this came out, it was a huge part of our class. He gave evening seminars. I have my notes from the seminar he gave in February. Let's see. February 27th, 1995.
Wow. Baby Mowdy notes.
I know, baby Mowdy.
So Mowdy lore.
But again, in 95, I was
Mowdy lore.
like 10 years old. So, you know,
the next time
I was a baby.
The next time I DM a D&D campaign, they're going to come across some Mowdy lore. That's going to happen somehow. Somehow there's going to be Mowdy lore.
To the song of a Rocket Man.
Absolutely.
Oh my God.
So the bell curve is filled with Arthur Jensen's research, as well as other scientists funded by the Pioneer Fund. These authors, Charles Murray and Dick Herrnstein, they were not funded by the Pioneer Fund, but all of their research is from researchers that were, right? So they're writing the coattails of this idea that blacks are inherently and genetically less intelligent than us. Compensatory educations, here's a component I forgot about Arthur Jensen. Compensatory education efforts have failed. Therefore, we should stop spending money on them because we can't educate blacks the same way that we educate whites. Right? Compensatory education's not going to work. They're genetically less smart. We can't raise their intelligence. So let's stop wasting our money on that. Well, what do they argue here? Hey, let's cut all of the social programs that are compensatory education. Instead of focusing on this side of the bell curve, let's give the money to this side of the bell curve. Let's give all of our money to the gifted because the cognitive elite are going to rule the world. Fast forward 30, 40 years, and Trump is running against the fucking cognitive elites that Charles Murray wrote this about. Keep in mind, he thinks that he and the readers of this book are part of the cognitive elite. When he talks to the readers, he's like, we all know our friends are within the 15% percentile of the top, he literally says shit like that. So make your bed, you lay in it, Chuck. I say Chuck because Dick Herrnstein died before the publication of this, and Charles Murray is also a focus of a bunch of my videos because he hates Trump. He doesn't understand how he got elected. He doesn't understand how Trump, the guy who ran against the cognitive elite, who he propped up as the leaders of the world, how he got elected. And he also was completely fucking blind to his role in it. He fucking set the fire and wants to be the firefighter.
Are either of you familiar with the historical figure Narcissa Whitman?
Oh, that name sounds really familiar.
Okay. Narcissa Whitman was a missionary in the 1840s in Oregon County, what would later become the state of Washington. She was a missionary to the Cayuse people that lived in that area. Narcissa truly believed that she was bringing the word of God, faith, into the savages. That was how she wrote about them. She would write letters home about, oh yes, about how she wouldn't allow them in the house because they had too many fleas. She allowed them into her house. They would bring fleas in. About how she disciplined their children for using Cayuse language. While they were around her, they
Their
were only
language.
allowed to speak English. She would berate the Cayuse tribe for holding their tribal dances and songs. The drums were too loud. They kept her awake at night.
And maybe get the fuck off their land.
Well, Narcissa Whitman died when the Cayuse people finally got so fucking tired of her. One of the children describes how she was standing at the window and a musket ball came in and hit her in the shoulder. The Cayuse people came in, grabbed her, took her outside, basically tore her into pieces and burned her. I know.
mean,
It's so sad.
fuck around and find out.
Yeah, my point is the people that you seek to dehumanize won't put up with it forever.
No.
And one of the things that one of the advantages the Cayuse had at the time is one of the advantages that we have today, which was forms of communication and community that the people invading their spaces don't understand. And we have, and by we, I mean the majority of the Americans that aren't really into all of the shit that's going on, aren't real happy right now. There are breaks happening within support for Trump. And you saw it just the other day when the stock market was down and like Bill Ackman and Jamie Dimon, like all of these prominent people in finance were like, hey, this is no, I'm not taking this.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote an article on now Beehive, but in Unburdened a while ago about how the fire hose of fascism was happening too fast, too soon. Wow, that was really loud thunder. We're having a very bad thunderstorm right now. So if I suddenly disappear, anyway, the truth of the matter is that there were a lot of people behind putting this in power right now. Mowdy just talked about how the guy that wrote the book is like, I have no idea how this happened. But what they're learning is that the people are more likely to treat them like Narcissa Whitman was treated by the Cayuse than they are to just lay down and take it. This is not going over well with the electorate. You saw it on April 5th. You saw the protests on April 5th. If you're on Blue Sky, like if you just watched the news, you were like, there were protests. If you were on Blue Sky or Reddit or
my boss was texting me from Philadelphia.
Sure. Yeah. I think I was the only member of my family who didn't go down to the protest. I was helping my neighbors some stuff. It was just a bad day for me. The 19th will be different. I'll be out on the 19th. But people aren't just taking this the way that I think a lot of the people around Trump assumed that we would. They just assumed that we would lay down and just be like, well, I guess the fascists won. I don't know. Can you talk a little bit about how a lot of this was there was pushback against all of this? Mm-hmm. Obviously Brown v. Board of Education, we know how it turned out okay for, the last half of the 20th century. Can you just talk about like some of the pushback that was happening while these guys are doing all of this in the background?
So keep in mind this is post World War II, right? Like it's only a decade and a half after like we got out of World War II, and World War II changed everything. All of those crazy ideas I mentioned early about American eugenics went way underground, right? After the war. Before the war, awesome. Look at Germany. they're doing what we want. And in Germany, they're like, look at America. They're doing what we want. Right.
Right.
So like that was cool. And then it wasn't cool. And then it really wasn't cool. Right. The Depression also had a hand in that. Like, hey, super strong Aryan stock, you're in the same soup line as everyone else.
Yep.
So these
they hated
ideas of
that.
superiority, people got humbled, right? And then they got discouraged from thinking in genetic ways. Now, as a psychology teacher, I go over the history of psychology, and I mention behaviorism because, like, when people think of psychologists, they either think of like a Freud figure or like a person in a white lab coat with a mouse. And the reason why people have that second idea is because behaviorism was such a popular part of psychology, where we tested other animals on the premise that humans are animals. We can learn about humans by testing other animals. And that's all born out of the behaviorist movement, which has a philosophical foundation in the blank slate tabula rasa John Lockean way of thinking, right?
Right.
Behaviorists think, the American behaviorist John B. Watson said, give me your child and I can make them into a banker, a pauper, a painter, like, and he just listed a bunch of occupations with the idea that we're born blank slate and experience writes knowledge onto us, right? That's completely different than genetically we are completely different from each other.
Right.
And also 1950s, the American dream, America's the land of milk and honey, opportunity, right? Come to America. Why? Because we're the environment where hard work is rewarded. So everything is about everybody is equal, and it is the environment that matters.
And your work ethic, meritocracy as well.
Be careful with that word.
No, I'm saying that's the idea. That's the underlying promise. I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying that's the underlying promise.
Yeah. So it is it took a few decades. I mean, we're still not at equality now.
Right. Of course not. Right.
Take your point.
Right.
I absolutely take your point.
Yeah.
So what was happening in social science is UNESCO, a part of the United Nations having to do with education and culture, had meetings in 1950 and 1951 where they stated their conclusion was there are no race differences in intelligence or educability, and that was becoming the popular way of thinking, which drove everything underground, which is why it became as nefarious as it is. Now, the reason I'm bringing this stuff up is this is like the origin of the game plan, where I need valid people to say shitty things.
Yes.
They don't exist. Let me make a fake foundation with fake fucking experts that are going to say the shit that I want. Now I have those experts that I want.
Like Ron Vera, the economist.
Peter Navarro's mentor.
What was his mentor? What was his name?
Ron Vera.
Ron Vera.
It's an anagram of Pete Navarro.
Right.
So like it's completely made up person.
Right.
Yeah.
The John Barron effect.
Wonderfully narcissistic way of everything I learned about economics, I learned from me.
Yep. By the way, here's a trade war.
There is one thing that I just wanted to point out, like going back to like the concept that talking about like the bell curve and how it's like, oh, Black people can't be educated, like white people. It for the longest time there were like and there still are to this day, there were systemic issues, meaning that they didn't get the same funding and access to a good education as more affluent people who look like me.
Right.
And so if you are literally just plucking random Black student, random white student, then you're going to see differences, not because like the Black person doesn't have the same capabilities as the white person. It's just they weren't given access to the same resources in school. Like I was a gifted kid. Like the whole Mensa thing, like I did all of that in gifted in elementary school and beyond. But it wasn't just white people in class with me either.
Sure.
But it was a more like not affluent, because like it but like where I grew up, it was, middle class area. So we had good schools, but there were, towns not too far away where, they didn't have the greatest schools, and they did tend to have higher minority populations, and they had more students per classroom, and they didn't get the same funding per student, or it wasn't allocated the same way. So, that's why you see disparities between people. It has nothing to do with race or skin color or ethnic background or anything. It all comes down to how much investment are you putting into that student for them to succeed? If you are not investing the same, then you're not going to get the same output. Like, it's input versus output. You invest the same, you will get, I mean, sure, some people are going to have a little bit more intelligence than other. Like, there's a variability there, but it's very, very small. It is not, like bell curve level. It's, some people are gifted and maybe some aren't, but like all in all, like, it's not a huge difference, but it all comes down to the resources you're putting in to educate that student.
Well, we have multiple different initiatives, I guess you would say, at our brokerage, empowering people to talk to more women, empowering people to talk to more minority groups, communities of color, because there's so many different communities that were denied financial literacy.
Hello.
You say to somebody, oh, you can take your 401k and you can go put it into a fixed annuity and it's not going to lose money in the stock market if the stock market goes down, right? Now it'll be fixed, so it'll have a fixed return. It can't have the big returns you can get out of a stock market. And people are like, how have I never heard about this before? I've never heard of a fixed annuity. Fixed annuities have been around for, I don't know, 100 years, 150 years, a very long time. But it's not that they haven't existed. It's that the information wasn't, people weren't educated in all different communities. And so we have initiatives. We have one for women and one for communities of color to make sure that they're just education. We're not trying to sell anything to anyone, just education, just financial literacy. And there were a lot of people, I hate to break it to you, some of them were very prominent people that you've probably heard their names of, who were like, yeah, well, why would we want to teach the communities of color and the women this information? They wouldn't get it anyway. They wouldn't understand it. That was the thinking.
That hurts.
I'm sorry. Like,
So I have an analogy. Let's see if I can shake this. I was telling my wife this the other day.
Sure.
And when I told her it was perfect, but I probably won't be able to replicate it.
Right.
It was something like, it's like the people who have been doing the oppressing the whole time determined what parts of the oppression weren't working, and they tried to fix it. And they determined that it didn't work.
Weird.
Because they didn't get the results that they wanted. That's what it seems like it is. Like arguments against compensatory education. It's like, well, we gave them the thing.
Right.
So
that was
what?
Bush's No Child Left Behind. That was the whole thing about No Child Left Behind is, listen, we've been giving all these money to the schools and their test scores aren't high enough.
Yeah.
So we have to make all of these changes to make sure that your test scores go up. That was all that No Child Left Behind was blaming poorer communities for not having as good schools as other communities do.
See, and now that's another whole riff that I have, which is approaching society from an economic perspective.
We need
value is determined by their productivity.
Yes. Well, not
Which
just
completely
their productivity.
shits on disabled people.
So
yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
but not just their productivity, their monetary results. If the community that you live in is poor, it's your fault for not making it more fluid. Anyway, if we don't stop now,
that's neoliberalism.
If we don't stop now, we're going to go for another.
Bring me back on when you want to talk intelligence, bro.
Okay, all right.
No.
Let's end on something a little bit funny,
Yes.
Or a funny way to describe something awful. So the Republicans and the Trump administration, they're gutting the Board of Education and they're rolling back child labor laws because their entire thing is basically the children yearn for the mines. They play Minecraft after all.
Yeah. Listen, Mowdy. I could go
out of that sentence with such command.
I could go
Mowdy. Okay, fine. I'm listening.
We could go another.
That's his Dom voice.
Yeah, right.
All right.
It's the voice of God. I could literally probably talk to you for another 20 hours, but
Invite me back, brother. And I'm going to be having hangs and panels on this as well. I kind of
good.
want to turn this into a thing until I've exhausted my.
And I know some people. Are you on Blue Sky yet?
I'm not yet.
You need to get on Blue Sky, and I can tag in. I know some people that would be great to talk about this. People that have a different complexion than myself,
Mm-hmm.
and a different upbringing than myself, that probably have better perspectives than I do.
That would be great.
Not probably, definitely have better perspectives I do. That I think would go really well. So you need to join Blue Sky so that I can.
Very good.
I can make those connections
and
happen.
eventually, before I go, William H. Tucker, my professor, we maintain correspondence. I currently teach in the psychology department of my alma mater. So I teach at Rutgers Camden. And there is a William H. Tucker symposium. And I think there's even a scholarship fund that people could donate to. I don't have all the details yet, but moving forward, like, that is going to be my jam. Like,
that's a great idea.
Any video I make is just going to link directly to that.
Right.
And I talked to an ex professor who's not my colleague, which is super weird. And he was saying they might want to make the symposium annual. And then I was just like, point me in a direction. Let me know who I need to talk to about making that happen, because I'll happily take charge of it. But all of those things are potentially to come. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens as my energy.
Right. Yeah.
That's the
thing. You have energy to do all this stuff too. That is the one thing that holds you back. But listen, thank you so much for coming on.
Pleasure's
This
mine.
was awesome. Kitty, thank you for just being you.
I try.
That's awesome. And thank me for being.
There it is. Thank you, Dom.
Thank me.
Thank you,
Thanks
Dom.
for having me.
Thanks
for that fucking goatee. Keep wearing that shirt.
Absolutely. I don't like the show very much, but I like the shirt a lot. So
looks good.
My shirt is like bedazzled and sparkly with a skull.
Oh wow, it's like a whole skull. It's like a whole diamond.
And it's got like rips on the top of the back here.
Oh, that's cool. It's like zombie
Outer Known. This is called the waffle print.
Yeah.
Outerknown.com, people. For you clothes people, carbon to cobalt, outerknown.com. You know me.
Listen, I think the right way to close this show down is with a little bit of Mouty Thirst content. So I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
So good.
I appreciate it.
On my skin.
Okay.
I mean, he's starting to like drop into that Seth Andrews register, with like that deeper.
All right. Okay. We're not. Okay. So remember to subscribe and like the stream. If you have comment, share, and like your subscription thing, whatever it is that I never say, the stuff that I never say. There's buttons on your screen. Please click them.
Do the things. You know,
click
the
all
YouTube thing.
Just any button on your screen.
Press it.
Press it.
Touch it.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Touch that button. Yeah.
That's how we needed to end it.